So in today's video, we are going to cover a phenomenon that has essentially been sweeping the internet. It started showing up on my personal feed, on YouTube, all over, to the point where I decided to go down the rabbit hole and research a little bit about the story. And the story has to do with two characters in a reality television show called Vanderpump Rules, and essentially an affair that they had. So there was one character who was dating another character for 9 years. They were living together, they were life partners. And it was a male and a female, and the female, Ariana, in the relationship was cheated on by her partner, Tom, with their very good friend, their very close mutual friend named Raquel. And, in this video, as I started going down the rabbit hole and watching these different clips online and sort of going through and learning about the story, it struck me how many times I had seen almost exactly this type of scenario and dynamic in my private client practice. In fact, I would call this a textbook reason people cheat. So, what I want to do here today, because it's not my business to be judging people's lives or, um, you know, figuring out like who's good or who's bad or anything like that. I mean, I think human beings have patterns that are healthy or unhealthy based on their own programming, their own issues and challenges. And of course, I'm not condoning cheating in any type of way, but I just want to make really clear, the goal of this video is not to like judge and gossip about people's lives. It's to actually teach about something called limerence, which is extreme infatuation that can actually have similar effects on the brain that drugs do. And they can increase it. Being in limerence generally increases oxytocin, which is the bonding neurochemical, serotonin, the well-being neurochemical, and dopamine, thought of as the motivation neurochemical. There's also something called phenylethylamine, which is like the attraction neurochemical. And, when we're in limerence, we're in this really extreme state of infatuation. And this textbook story that we hear between Tom Sandoval and Raquel, I'm going to use it as an example today. But what I'm actually going to be intending to unpack with you here is a really powerful understanding of why people cheat, how limerence affects the subconscious mind, what the experience is like, and how to mitigate these patterns in our relationships overall. Whoever you might be on in the story of Raquel and Tom and Ariana, whoever you might be, like whichever side you've experienced or been on, how to deeply understand these dynamics and how we can empower different strategies in relationships so we don't have to fall into the trap of limerence that can actually really blow up our relationships. So, first and foremost, what I noticed when I was watching some clips, I watched a clip of Tom Sandoval on the Howard. Oh my gosh, I'm so bad with names. I'm really good with faces. I'm not a names person. I'm trying really hard here. I keep thinking of the song of the Howie Day, which is like some song, some singer way back. But he was on a podcast with somebody who I can think of, but I can't think of his name. And he was explaining what led up to this. Okay. Now, I'm not sitting here as I rehash his explanation to say, this is good. This makes sense. No wonder everybody should cheat if they feel like this. Absolutely not. I do not think that it's healthy to cheat when you're committing to a monogamous relationship. I actually don't think it makes any logical sense because it's like you're investing in something and then sabotaging it at the same time. But I also know from sitting with so many clients, thousands of clients over the years, one-on-one over and over and over again, that there tends to be this really clear pattern that happens almost every single time that people cheat, unless of course they have, a past or history with sex addiction, and certain specific other cases that will be the exception to the rule when there's cheating for other reasons. Although limerence can be one of them in that case too. There are some other deep rooted things happening in those sorts of cases. But what I find when people cheat in relationships is textbook this example of what happened between Tom and Raquel and Ariana. So Tom was in a relationship with Ariana and he was sharing about how in this relationship dynamic, he started having his needs not met. And some of the needs he mentioned in this clip of this podcast I watched were things like attention, encouragement, intimacy, so physically and sexually. And to feel, the big one that stood out to me the most was to feel important, special, or wanted. It was like he kept talking about how those things weren't there, how he kept trying to reach out to her and engage with her and make bids, And the way he described this is that she treated him like he was annoying, and he kept feeling like he was annoying. And it's interesting to me too, and I'll make a separate video about the attachment styles. But there was obviously certain attachment flags that showed up in this dynamic to me as well. And so he kept talking about this, how he felt annoying, shut down, stonewalled, kind of iced out. And this is usually the pattern number one I would find. Okay. Somebody feels a certain way in a relationship and they don't know how to communicate their needs. And so instead, they keep making bids rather than actually just communicating directly. So instead of saying, hey, can we have a sit down? And I don't know, by the way, what happened behind their closed doors. I don't know them personally. And I'm not here to like make judgments. I'm here to say, this is what I saw from online. And this is a really interesting case study in a sense of like a learning we can take away from this and how it applies to our relationship. So maybe they did talk behind closed doors. I don't know. But from the clips I watched, it seemed like he seemed very disempowered to communicate directly and say, look, I'm really needing to feel like I matter to you, like I'm important, like I'm special. Sometimes I feel a bit criticized or shut down. So there was this absence of communication. And this sets the tone. This is where I see people cheat from. Okay. Number one, deeply unmet needs that are really important to them. And then they feel the sense of learned helplessness or disempowerment around communicating those needs. So this brings me to number two, which is then they start to build resentment. Okay. They start feeling frustrated. They disconnect or disengage back. Now we could call chicken or the egg. I don't know what led up to Ariana, being in this dynamic where she was shutting him out. It sounded like as well from the pieces I gathered that she felt that he was always out doing things. And I'm sure eventually that causes her to shut down. I'm not here to make judgments on the story and who's in the right or who's in the wrong. And I'll stop saying this so often, but I just want to be clear. Like, I don't actually know these people, and nor is it like my business to go into their private lives and try to make guesses. I'm just pulling from information I saw that was clear on the internet in terms of their interviews and discussions and like what we can draw away from it. So the next part, right? We have this unmet needs, this resentment forming, and then we have Raquel in the picture. And from the discussions I watched about Raquel, she seemed to have Tom Sandoval on this massive pedestal. So guess what that means? Well, she made him feel really important, really special, really wanted. She also seemed to be a bit of a people pleaser. I might make a separate video about the codependency aspects I noticed when watching some of the interviews and pieces of this story. But, I really saw this dynamic of her being a people pleaser. So obviously giving a lot of attention, giving a lot of encouragement, being very validating, right? And offering up physical and sexual intimacy. And so we see this dynamic of all the things that Tom is deeply missing and yearning for in his relationship with Ariana. He all of a sudden starts getting either directly or the promise of, right? The potential future and the fantasy of having these things from Raquel. And on top of that, there's this element of them being around each other a lot. A lot of times when affairs happen, it usually starts with these exact dynamics. It starts with unmet needs, resentment. We'll talk about resentment again in a moment. Then somebody coming in and representing these needs. And then it's not like a one-time thing where you saw them at a coffee shop and you never run into them again. It's usually that there's this repeated exposure to these things. It's almost like somebody being in a dynamic where, it's like their favorite chocolate cake and they're exposed to it over and over and over and over again. And let's say they have a sugar addiction, right? So limerence starts to form when somebody comes along that meets your deeply unmet needs. This is where we actually start to lose our sense of stability. Now, I heard Tom talk about this on that podcast I was mentioning earlier, and he talked about how it was like a drug. He said, he mentioned how he, couldn't sleep. He just kept thinking about her, obsessing, just felt so magnetically drawn to her. Like, he describes the infatuation in this absolutely massive way. And there's this repeated exposure to it. Now, you can see by the same token that Raquel's in limerence with Tom as well, but we're just going to stay focused on the Tom side of things for today. So after conducting many polls and surveys at the Personal Development School over the past few years, we have found that students come in and 92% of them become dominantly securely attached within 90 days if they focus on 6 crucial areas. These 6 crucial areas have to do with what it takes to become secure according to Gibson integrated attachment theory. And this is to tackle core wounds, learn your needs, learn to emotionally regulate, develop boundaries, communicate better, and update old behavioral coping mechanisms. Now, we have these roadmaps and course tracks laid out for you on the other side of when you join. So everything is simple and in front of you to help you take exactly the steps that you need to master your love life, create thriving relationships, and really see the results in your healing journey so you can let go of old wounds, old baggage, and truly leave it behind. And on top of that, included in this 30% off promotion for life, you also gain access to our daily live events, webinars. I'll be there 3 days a week to answer any questions that you have in your journey. And we have amazing certified integrated attachment theory experts who are there to support you with their daily live events and webinars Monday through Saturday. And this is a great opportunity to connect with like-minded people, to get your questions answered, and receive any extra bonus support that you need. And last but not least, we even have social events on a daily basis. So you can practice through a sharing circle, being a little bit more vulnerable, connecting with other like-minded people. You can practice through communication scripts, having tough conversations, and really modeling that out. And there are so many other supportive events that are there for you on your journey. So I would love for you to join and take this opportunity. I would love for you to be part of this challenge to become securely attached within that 90-day period. And I can't wait to see you on the other side. When we're in limerence, it's such extreme infatuation that we can become irrational, illogical. We can lose our sense of stability or self. And there tends to be a lot of rumination and a deep fantasy bond. And you can tell that prior to something happening, there was sort of a fantasy bond being built. So now we start having the exact, like I'm telling you, these would be the textbook cases I would see in terms of when people cheat in relationships. Like when people would come into my office and say, "Hey, I'm here to try to salvage my relationship because I just cheated and I feel horrible about it and I have no idea how to repair it or where to start." It would have these same exact key ingredients 95% of the time. It would be, right? Just to review here so far. Deeply unmet needs in the relationship, learned helplessness for how to talk about it, resentment overall because this frustration that my partner doesn't see me or hear me or doesn't meet my needs, and then somebody who comes in who represents these needs, who's around you all the time. And then, and this is the most insidious part, quite honestly, is then what ends up happening is there is a justification. When people resent enough, they start to justify. They start saying, well, this person doesn't care about me anyway, so who cares if I cheat? And I've heard so many cases time and time again where from this space of resentment, a client would say to me something like, I just felt so frustrated. I felt like my partner didn't love me or care about me. So I made it okay. I told myself it was fine and that, my partner really wouldn't care if we ended things anyways. And this is the part like, there's all these unhealthy things. I'm not sitting here saying this is okay or that this makes it okay, right? It's not okay to cheat in a monogamous relationship. You made a commitment, you're pouring into something and you're sabotaging it at the same time. It's illogical, but these are the dynamics. Like if we're just looking at this purely as a case study, these are the dynamics and the foundations laid. And because the subconscious mind is a needs meeting machine and the subconscious can be tricky, it can justify its way around. You see this all the time in our personal lives around skipping the gym or around eating the chocolate that you said you weren't going to eat for your New Year's resolution. Or, in this case, making this massive error in a relationship to go against your partner, to break the commitment, to break the trust because it's starving for these needs so much. And so this brings this really important discussion up, which is, what do we do if we're ever in a case where we're experiencing limerence? And how can we learn from this experience that we see played out all over the internet? I think CNN was reporting on this, which is so interesting. Obviously, they need some support over there. So when we're seeing this dynamic, meaning that like they're obviously hurting a little for cases for things to cover. So, in other words, when we look at this dynamic, right, we have to break things down in chunks, right? One of the first things is, we can prevent limerence in our relationships from getting really good and becoming masterful at just communicating our needs proactively to our partners. If we have needs literacy and then we have the capacity to communicate, then all of a sudden, right there, when there is something that's unmet, we can go to our partner, we can open up the dialogue, we can hash things out, and we can solve for that. And so we're not going to put ourselves in a position where we're starving for something that we're not getting in the relationship, because we know that we can discuss that openly. And this is what securely attached people do. And this is why it's so preventative from having either party in the relationship have limerence. And the other thing is, often when we've got these deeply unmet needs, it can also represent a little bit of a fracturing in the relationship to ourselves, where we don't know how to give these things to ourselves either. So we starve for them even more. And that's going to really make the difference between attraction versus extreme limerence, right? Just like we can not have somebody meeting a need in our life in our romantic relationship, but that's going to happen from time to time if you're with somebody for years and years. In some case or another, there might be a need missing from time to time until you kind of realize it and communicate about it. But the real part is that if you have a fractured relationship where you don't know how to be present with yourself, make yourself feel important by prioritizing, things that are important to you, introspective work, getting to know yourself deeply, like some form of even emotional intimacy in the relationship to self, then you're extra starving for it more than somebody who's just not getting it from their partner, but, has a good bit of being able to be present and introspective in relationship to self. So again, now when somebody comes and represents that from outside of you, it's just a whole other level. And so you're going to see a big dynamic around that, right? This massive, like, we lose control of our rational selves when we're in limerence. And I've seen this again, in my client practice, where I've seen people show up outside of other people's homes, do things that are boundary violations to the other person because they're really not thinking rationally. And so, when you see these different dynamics, you're like, okay, we can learn what our needs are. We can learn to communicate our needs. We can learn to build a relationship to ourselves with our needs. And we can also make sure that if we have attraction or infatuation for somebody outside of our relationships, then we can try to use that as feedback and try to gather and understand, well, what is it about this person that I'm attracted to when I'm in a relationship with this person here? Oh, it's this need that they represent for me. They make me feel seen, heard, special, important, wanted. Limerence usually revolves around these types of things. And that's a call to action for you. That's a sign that you should go inwards and say, okay, how much am I asking for this in my relationship? How much am I giving it to myself? How can I empower these things in my relationship going forward? And by incorporating these 3 steps into all of your romantic relationships throughout your life, you are so much less likely to go into limerence and so much more likely to feel so much more fulfilled in your relationships overall. So I'll leave it at there for today. I'll definitely make like an attachment style video about this story as well, because I think there's so many really interesting learning experiences we can take from here. Let me know any other questions or videos you'd like me to make along this track in the comments below. And then also, if you want to do a deeper dive into limerence, we have a course that you can check out for free for 7 days, all about limerence. So you can access the link down below. And that's it for now. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you for being here. Please like, share, and subscribe, and I will see you in future videos.